Welcome to the HigherEdJobs podcast. I'm Andy Hibel, the Chief Operating Officer and one of the co-founders of HigherEdJobs.
And I'm Kelly Cherwin, the Director of Editorial Strategy. Today we're lucky because we are joined by the entire editorial team. So I just want to take a minute and let everyone introduce themselves here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Monika, Sziron, Assistant Director of Editorial Strategy with HigherEdJobs and HigherEdMilitary.
Hi, Monika. Where are you speaking with us from?
I am in lovely Minnesota.
It's 92 degrees here in Chicago today. How warm is it in Minnesota?
Oh, man, you're going to make me look at the radar. It is a lovely, lovely temp here. 73 degrees.
Wish I was there.
Hi, everyone. I'm Leah Jackson, the Assistant Director of Editorial Strategy and Staff Writer at HigherEdJobs. Nice to join you.
Hi, Leah. Same question for you. Where are you today?
In Pennsylvania. And I don't know what the temperature is right now, other than really hot.
Hi, I'm Mary Guiden, Associate Director of Editorial Strategy and Special Projects at HigherEdJobs, and I am live from the Oak Park office.
Hi, Mary. Mary is our newest member of the team. How's it been so far? That's not a loaded question at all, is it?
Yeah. It's been great, but I can't believe it's only been 2 months. I feel like it had to have been at least 6 months with everything that I've been learning.
And where did you move from prior to coming to the Midwest?
I was living in Denver, Colorado.
And who is your favorite coworker?
I would plead the fifth here. I think that's a wise choice.
It would be a tie between Baxter and Olaf.
Nicely played. Nicely played. Baxter and Olaf are our dogs. Feel like we have to put a picture up of the two of them now so folks know what they look like. And no offense, but if they did actually work here in the studio with us, A, they would be everybody's favorite coworkers, and B, we would get nothing done.
Very true. Very true.
What are we talking about today, Kelly?
Today we are going to talk about navigating personal challenges while staying engaged at work. So we were inspired by this topic after reading Eileen Honigman-Meyer's article, How to Be Emotionally Present at Work When You Have Real Stuff Going On at Home. And I know for all of us on this call today, it ranges from having infants and newborns to managing aging parents and teenagers and all the things in between. So I think that a lot of our audience probably can relate to this. So that's what we thought we'd have a discussion today about some of the things going on in our personal lives, but also obviously connecting that to Eileen's article. So I just want to mention a quote from Eileen's article that she said, "We all go through hard times, whether it's managing an illness, supporting a sick family member, going through a divorce, aiding a struggling child, or dealing with a job loss in the family. Weathering a crisis is an emotional and logistical undertaking." So we hope you will appreciate the discussion today. So let's get the conversation going, and then obviously trying to end on some notes on how we can apply this in the workplace, some tips from Eileen's article.
Actually, one of the things I'd consider if you're listening is the article should be listed wherever you clicked on the podcast. But if you're having a hard time finding it, the article went live on June 6, 2024. And maybe taking a quick look at before listening to the podcast, make the podcast a little bit more fruitful of a time spent with us.
And the article hasn't been published for that long, but it was also featured this week in one of our newsletters. And there's a buzz about the topic. We've already received multiple comments from people just saying how helpful it was at this time in their life.
For folks who maybe have not read the article, can we just try to start summarizing it, maybe like kind of by highlight, and seeing if we can start our conversation that way?
So one of the tips that I thought was really helpful from Eileen's article was about leaning into your routine. Having just came back from maternity leave, this is something that was a really welcome change for me. Maternity leave, as people who have gone through that know that it can be very chaotic. There's a lot of changes in schedules and routine. So coming back to work was a welcome change for me. I think that leaning into your routine is a great tip for anyone who might be struggling with something on the personal front. But as she says towards the end of the article, something else that I think is really important is it's okay to take breaks. It's okay to not feel like you can do everything. I think there's something to be said for leaning into your routine if it works for you. But I think there's something to be said for leaning into your flexibility if you're able. I want to give an example of flexibility. This morning is a great example. I got the kids up and was getting them ready for daycare at the normal time. We were following our routine, but my youngest, who is 3 months old, hasn't been sleeping well at sitters. So she's a little low on sleep. She, of course, fell asleep on me while I was feeding her. And instead of pushing myself and being a slave to my routine, I leaned into my flexibility that I'm fortunate to have with work. And I let her sleep on me. I actually worked a little bit from my phone this morning for an hour. So I think, while we may not all have that flexibility available to us, not feeling guilty about it, using it if you do have it, is another really great tip. If you're not able to stick with your routine, I don't think you should feel guilty about it.
Thanks, Leah. That's awesome. Actually, and there's one other thing that I wanted to highlight from what you just said there about the need to sometimes we feel like we have to be perfect and we have to do it all. And we need to kind of sometimes let that go. I mean, I personally, it is hard for me because I feel like I have to be the perfect mother. I have to be the perfect employee. I have to be the perfect everything. And it's just, it can be exhausting. So leaning into being a little bit more open to not being perfect is a great thing to do. So thank you for sharing that. And I hope I know they're not getting sleep, but you probably aren't getting sleep either. So I hope you can get some sleep soon.
Oh, thank you. And I like what you said, because that actually just reminded me of something that Andy said to me last year in regards to attending a conference with my oldest. And I think, Andy, you said that it's really hard to go to a conference with your kids because you feel like a bad parent and you feel like a bad employee all at the same time because you're trying to juggle both. And I think I feel that a lot just every day working, not just for the conference. So I think cutting yourself a little bit of slack and leaning into what Eileen says at the end about it's okay to take breaks. You don't have to push yourself so hard. We tend to be our own worst critics. And so trying not to do that during this time is really important.
Leah, you mentioned the ending of the article, and I highlighted something from that when she mentioned protecting yourself. She said, recognize what you're managing, accept it, and care for yourself accordingly. Give yourself the space, resources, and support you need to get through this. Adapt your thinking and allow yourself to be a person in pain. She also says some years we just grow and thrive, while other years we just survive, but both shape our character. So, just kind of like piggybacking what you're saying, like just give yourself a little bit of grace and know that none of us can be perfect in every situation. And we just have to do the best we can.
I actually think that really kind of transitions nicely to like the second major area that Eileen hits that I really like, because I think it's from a work-life perspective, it really goes all around the 360 degrees of working and life. And that's get clarity about what you need. One of the great sentences in this section says, having a sense of what you need before you bring any team members into your situation puts you in control. And I think that's really, really important and really goes to, I like speaking about expectations. Expectations can be the biggest enemy of anything you do. And internal versus external expectations. Your own expectations of yourself in these situations may not be realistic. Have that conversation with yourself about what is it that I can do and what is just not sustainable. I can no longer, for example, be a member of the bowling team now that we have our third child. That's probably a pretty good call if you're a dad and a bowler for the bowling league that you're in. And where did that come from? That came from a previous guest. Remember, we just had a professional bowler on the podcast. But that's going to be harder. But if you are a professional bowler and that's essential for your self-care, then prioritize that. That's a reasonable expectation. But then the external expectations, particularly from work, I'd actually like to approach it both as an employee and as a supervisor, that it's wonderful. And I've had all of you actually in some way or another say, I need this or I need that. And then it's so much easier because I then know what the expectation is. What is it that you want? When you're able to clarify that to me as your supervisor, I am better able to address and give you what you need, or be able to find a way to say, hey, I might not be able to give you this, but would you be able to make that work? That is so, so important. And as the employee, I actually think it's better for all concerned if you're able to do that. So if you have a supervisor that you're wondering, well, God, will they like it if I tell them what I need? I think you might be pleasantly surprised that a good supervisor is going to love that. You've just made their job so much easier. And creating a sense of expectations and ones that everybody agrees to and shared goals, that's a pathway to success. It helps you to reinforce leaning into your routine and help you be able to do your routine as you need it to have done. If you have to pick up the kids at a certain time, tell that to your employer. If that's important to you and you're important to them, they're going to make that happen.
Andy, I really appreciated that section of the article as well. And in terms of my situation, I moved back to the Chicago area about 1.5 years ago from Colorado. My dad is in now probably middle stages of dementia and likely has Alzheimer's. And I've become a caregiver for him, which has been a lot. And hopefully I'm not going to get emotional here, but what I have really appreciated is the topic came up even during our interview. And I just appreciated being able to share that and hear back from you. I just remember you saying, if anything ever happens, don't worry about work. We're here for you. And it means a lot.
Do you want to take a break for a second?
No, it's okay.
We do not have any sort of Kleenex here,
okay.
But we do have coffee that has a sandpaper covering, if that helps. That's the only paper we have in here.
I didn't think I would cry immediately, so just...
Well, Mary, I remember Andy talking about that, and the good thing is, and this isn't supposed to be like a conversation, but like how fantastic it is to work at HigherEdJobs and how fantastic Andy is as a supervisor, but being authentic and actually welcoming that conversation and being true to those words is great. So back to what, you were saying, and Andy and Mary, what you're saying is like the whole importance of communicating, and, your supervisor can't read your mind. And thank you for, having the courage to share that with everyone. So I don't know if that was right. I didn't mean like the courage, but like, I know it was hard. It was emotional to say that. And I wish I could give you a hug right now.
I think for me, I liked where Eileen also mentions deciding who you will share this information with and when. Leah had been on maternity leave, and I had sent an email to Leah and Kelly a month or so ago saying, we've got an interview today with a caregiver organization. And I forgot Leah didn't know that my dad has dementia and that I'm helping out. And later on, she said, I didn't want to ask. I saw that in the email and I wasn't sure what was happening. And so I gave her the skinny on the situation. And she shared that she had a relative who had early onset Alzheimer's and saw how difficult that was. So I appreciated her sharing that.
I think one of the things to connect all the dots here of what we're talking about is people have lives outside of work. And believe it or not, for most people, the lives they have outside of work are more important than the lives they have inside of work. And from an employer perspective, and I will say this about my two co-founders, John Eichenberry and Eric Blesner, we all three feel pretty strongly that we want to have an organization that recognizes that fact. And we try to do it in many different ways. But this way, this is one of the most important. And I think in a post-COVID world, more and more employers are seeing it that way and understanding it's even more important to people having just gone through what the world just went through. You need to acknowledge that. You need to see that. But don't take that as like work life is not important to people. Giving them meaningful work and finding ways to keep them engaged and motivated and excited about the work they're doing through these stages is absolutely possible. This isn't, oh my gosh, they're so preoccupied with their life outside of work that they're not going to get work done. I think you'll actually find that they'll, I can speak from the folks I've known who've gone through maternity leaves, having a little bit of a break to really throw yourself into work when you get that chance to do it is a welcome respite from some of the day-to-day routines that you're fully immersing yourself with. And speaking a little bit from my own experience, but I think I've seen other people go through that as well, that, hey, God, it's a little nice to get into my work routine for a few minutes now and not have to be awake with the baby when I have the chance to do that.
Yeah, Andy, I really like what you said about life outside of work. And that's kind of where my wheels were turning when this article came out. And I will say, just as a caveat, I think of the team, I'm probably the one that you guys need to pull emotions out of me a little bit sometimes because I just naturally separate work and home. And so half the time you guys are like, what's Monika doing? I'm probably in that protect yourself category of Eileen's article. But I wanted to mention, thinking about the job seeker, my husband right now is on 2 hiring committees actually for his institution. And this last week, I have had a sinus infection, like our kid's been home with us. And in the middle of these interviews that he's doing with these job seekers, I'm the wife over there texting him like, oh my, I'm sick and I don't feel good and all this stuff. And meanwhile, he's, taking job seekers around campus. And so I think that life outside of work element is so important, especially if you're a job seeker, thinking about this person that's interviewing me has their own stuff going on. Like his wife's probably texting him that the baby's upset and she has a sinus infection and she's crabby. And, keeping those things in mind as you're in this scenario is just another important element I found in just being emotionally present. So that's just my little where I kind of went with that.
That was great, Monika.
Mary, how would you feel about talking about the support system and then talking about establishing a new support system for this new routine that you have? Because I think you've been pretty impressive about how you've been going about it. Like you have a dog with a torn hamstring.
At the dog center.
Oh, hold it. A basset hound with a torn hamstring. You had a really good plan of having your dad watch Sam, and you had to pivot on that pretty darn quickly. So do you want to talk about the support system and then talk about identifying the support system?
With starting this new job back in the middle of March, I'm mostly working from home, but going up to Oak Park once a week, once every other week, depending upon Kelly and Andy's schedules and what's on the roster. And I thought initially that given that I was going to be gone just one work day and we have a backyard, that my dad would be able to let Sam out in the backyard. And he did that at least one time, but then some things came up where, I had talked about these are the signs of this is how you know when a dog needs to go out and go potty, like they sit by one of the doors or they may scratch on one of the doors. And we talked about that and I wrote it down. And then when I got home one day, he just said like, I wasn't sure what was happening because Sam was sitting by the front door and then he went by the back door. And I just said, oh, Dad, that means he needs to go potty. So if you ever see him do that, you need to let him out into the backyard. And so it became clear to me after one or two of those times that I couldn't leave Sam, my dog, home alone with him because I didn't want to have him hold it all day. That just felt like, he's very obedient. He does not have accidents in the house, so he probably could do it, but it just wasn't fair to him. And I started thinking about, Andy, you mentioned the temperature today in Chicago is in the 90s. So I have a couple of great sitters that I found through Rover. And so now Sam goes to daycare on Thursdays that I'm up in the office. And that's been an adjustment for Dad. I think initially he was asking me like, well, why can't he stay with me? And so I was trying to describe to him, he gets to go to Rachel's house and Rachel's daughter, who's, she's in grade school, but she loves Sam. And so I was showing him all the photos of Sam with Kennedy, this little girl who just loves him. And of course, Sam loves it too, getting attention from a couple of kids instead of, I'm sure he's bored when I'm home working. And so he looks forward to Thursdays too. And so that's been part of the transition with this new job.
Andy and Mary, you talked about, having the need to pivot. I mean, in life, we have the best laid plans and they don't always go the way that we expect sometimes. And for those of you guys who are on this Zoom call, this won't be a surprise, but you know that I like plans. I have a hard time when things are unknown.
No.
Yes, I know. So there was a quote in the section under create your narrative, and Eileen said a sense of control. Actually, it was from a professor that she interviewed, Dr. Ibrahim Taney. And the quote was, a sense of control is perception. If you feel out of control, change your perception of what you can control and be in control of yourself. So I don't know how you guys feel, but like when I feel overwhelmed and I can't control everything, it's hard. Like, anxiety sets in and I, back to my original comment of like, I don't feel like I'm being a good mom and I don't feel like I'm getting everything done at work. But I guess my advice is to pause and navigate what are the priorities. Just take a step back and one thing at a time. I try to take my own advice that I give to my kids. Control what you can control. You can control your emotions for the most part of how you react to something. Taking time to digest what you have to get done and looking at the things that you can control. Because there's things that are circulating around in our lives that we just obviously can't control. I can't control how many emails I'm going to get in a day and what fires might have to be put out or what, things have to change last minute. But I can control how I approach that and the attitude. So that was a good reminder to me.
It's kind of interesting right here. I just got a text talking about home life versus what happens at work. I just got a text from our contractor who's doing some renovations at the house, needing to move a meeting. And my wife said I was recording a podcast today and would not be able to respond for some time. But I found it a little bit ironic that I got this text during this. So I responded back and said, well, we're doing this podcast about having to be present at work when there's stuff going on at home. And my wife, who's clearly a lot smarter and emotionally intelligent than I am, responds back, what about doing a podcast called How to Be Emotionally Present and Physically Present at Home when you have real stuff going on at work? Sometimes with that narrative, to me, the narrative becomes about, well, how am I going to get this stuff at work done? Like how am I going to do it? I don't feel like I'm able to be in two places at once. And to me, when I get to that spot, because you really don't have control when that feeling is going to hit you, I always think just identifying that feeling is the most important thing you can do. Just call it out. Oh, there you are, you little troublemaker. You're going to try to mess with me right now, aren't you? No, I spotted you. You're there. I acknowledge it, but you're not going to mess with what's going on here. And at least for me, that gives me a little bit of space to be able to de-escalate it long enough that I can get some perspective and move to the next moment. Because when I feel overwhelmed like that, I don't have control over it. I don't have control over anything at that point. I just have to kind of try to get myself out of the rabbit hole that I'm in.
I love the advice of identifying it. Mon, Leah, Mary, do you ever have any situations where you're like, you have to take a pause and identify what you're feeling? And
Well, I do. I agree. I think within Eileen's piece too, when she said, you might just have to shut down at some points in the day, or you might just have to, if it's 2:00 and I've hit a wall, none of the work that I'm going to be doing for the rest of the day is going to be productive, or it's going to be bad for my mental health, or it's going to not be productive for me personally, then I will just say like, okay, it's 2:00 and you know what? Those emails can wait, or that response can wait. This review of this article can wait. So I think I related to that a lot with the, you might just have to, again, there's that protect yourself category that I think I fall into a lot is, all right, set that boundary and say, okay, tomorrow's a new day. Today's today, and we're going to get through it, and just call it.
And I think shifting gears too, or stepping away from work, Monika, like you described, that's been important for me as well. I've been better about going to the gym. And since last fall, I've been going to water aerobics classes because I have bad knees. And the classes, they may sound cheesy, but they're actually a really good workout. And there's a class that I go to where it's all in deep water. So you kind of spend 45 minutes just doing different arm exercises and almost like riding a bike, just up and down the lap lane for 45 minutes. And some of the classes, some of the women and men will, be singing Whitney Houston songs and things like that. So it's a nice break. To me, it makes me smile. I don't find that cheesy. I think it's fun. And, maybe sometimes I'll sing along too.
Care to share what that sounds like when you do?
Maybe in a Journey song.
Calling all higher ed professionals. If you like what you're hearing on the Higher Ed Jobs podcast, subscribe to Higher Ed Jobs Insider Update, your weekly ticket to the latest opportunities, trends, and insider tips in the world of higher education, delivered directly to your inbox. Don't miss out on featured job postings, career advice, job search tips, and more. Subscribe now and stay one step ahead in the ever-evolving landscape of academia. Head to higheredjobs.com/insider to sign up. Your future self will thank you. Once again, that's higheredjobs.com/insider.
Did we touch on it enough that some of this stuff is a privilege, like working from home. Not everybody has that flexibility.
No, we did not talk about that.
I feel like for me, like, yes, like working from home can be hard at times, but I also acknowledge that it really is a privilege that not everybody has. And I feel like we have so much data from Coupa HR that says what employees want, like the flexibility that they want, they're not necessarily getting.
I think that's a great point. And I think that's one of the key points here, as we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, about folks who might not have the same work situation that we do, which is hybrid or remote work. But for somebody who is physically required to be someplace and you're not getting that respite that you need, finding those things outside of work, making sure they fit and prioritizing them in the routine is a wonderful, wonderful way to do it. And this is about protecting yourself. It's protecting who you are and what's important to you. And Monika, you've mentioned it a couple times. And as I think about this episode, I really think the protection is important here. Protecting yourself to be able to get grounded enough to be able to adjust whatever the situation is into your routine is where you need to get. And once you've gotten there, I think the wonderful part is if you're with an employer that you can make this work, it's wonderful to kind of hear you talk about that, Monika. We've worked together for a very long time. But one of the places where I feel I've most disappointed somebody is your wedding. There's a whole story behind Monika's wedding that Kelly and I were going to fly up to Minneapolis to go meet Monika's entire family and be able to celebrate with her at her wedding. And we were excited. And it was a lovely Saturday morning in Chicago. But there was what I thought was just a little bit of rain the night before. And if anybody's flown through O'Hare basically believes a little bit of rain is licensed to say massive winter blizzard, summer version. And somehow our flight got canceled and we were going to miss the wedding later that afternoon. So Kelly and I are like, we're going to make this happen. We're going to drive up 6 hours to Monika's wedding.
I can't believe that.
And we get about 2.5 hours up there. And Kelly's looking, I'm driving. Kelly's looking at her phone saying, I'm not sure what's up with the weather. And Kelly and I both, Kelly grew up in Wisconsin. I went to middle school and high school in Wisconsin. We're both like, hey, if you're from Wisconsin, you will know this. There's a Rocky Rococo's. And we're both like, yes, that is from our childhood. Let's stop at Rocky's and talk this through. And we really, like, we looked at it and we realized, like, even driving because of the weather and to get around the weather, we weren't even going to make the wedding that way. And at the Rockies, we actually recorded a video and texted it to Monika saying, yes, we're so sorry, and still feel awful we didn't make it. But hearing you talk reminds me where as much as we might be guarded and as much as we have these good boundaries, they are very good boundaries for us to have to understand the professional and the personal. These are the people you're sharing a large part of your journey in life with. And if they treat you right and you treat them right, you really have the opportunity to not only get a great work experience, but also friends and travel partners in your life experience that are really meaningful. And the idea that I couldn't make a coworker's wedding, it wasn't about the coworker, it was Monika's wedding. And we saw the pictures, still not quite the same. It looked like a very good time. But I think being able to share in those things with the people you work with and go through that journey with, that's kind of what makes work extra special to me.
Man, I remember that. And I was getting ready when I got the video. I was like getting my makeup on for the wedding, and you guys sent me that video. And I think, I mean, to be honest, it would have been great if you were there, of course. But we did party a lot. So I don't know if you wanted to see that part. But I think, to be honest, it would have been great if you were there. But the amount of effort that you put in to even try to get there after missing a flight, then renting a car, then driving 2.5 hours just to turn around and go back home, I think that almost meant more to me, if that makes any sense. So you guys are sweet and great to be a part of this team.
So I was going to make a joke of, I know you don't like to be called boss, but taking a road trip for 6 hours with your boss, if that's like that you're more my friend than my boss. So that shows like what type of relationship and what type of community we have here at our workplace. And I hope others can have that as well. So yeah, I'm sorry we missed it, but I did get a Rocky Rococo slice out of it, and I got to dress up in a cute dress, but I didn't get to see you in your dress. But yeah, so. Well, thank you guys so much for having a conversation today.
We appreciate you listening to this podcast. It's a little bit more of a team podcast and a personal podcast than we normally do, but we thought the article was so worthy and the topic warranted a number of different perspectives than just Kelly and my perspective. If you have thoughts or you have comments about this podcast, please email us at podcast@higheredjobs.com or send us a direct message on X at HigherEdCareers. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you soon.